We're going to get started. It's really good to see everybody. So we're going to call the meeting to order of the Configuration Committee. It is exactly 5 p.m. Lisa is ready to take minutes. Spencer is ready to help us facilitate. And we have Ginny with us to really help us facilitate the meeting. I'm going to do a very short welcome. Everybody had the agenda and received the models online. So I wanted to start just as a reminder that as we discussed today, in some ways, the future of our district, because we've been working on these models, and we'll be all making important decisions that we're going to share with the board, or recommendations, right, that we're going to share with the board. I want us to take a moment on just to, sort of think ahead what is coming, that we're not just shaping the present, but we're building a foundation for the future of our students. And we want to make sure that our district remains strong and equitable. And reminder that we have a strategic plan, and I'm saying this also for people in the audience. We have a strategic plan that serves as our guiding map, and we all have agreed in the strategic plan. We have all of this critical work ahead, but we set a clear criteria a few months ago, last year. We upgraded that criteria. We shared our values, our core beliefs, and basically an unwavering commitment from this committee to every student and to create the best possible environment for those students. With that, we had the administration come to us, and they brought benchmarks at our last meeting. I'm just trying to put all of the dots together for people that were not able to be here at the last meeting. And with those benchmarks, we gave the green light to the administration to come back with some models to us. The administration worked diligently to bring forward some models that reflect what is best for students. Those models offer consistency, stability, and sustainability, which is what we asked them to do. And I'm not trying to say that those are the perfect models, but that's what we're trying to do, bring sustainability and stability to our district. So they were designed based on that criteria and those benchmarks, and they were focused on what we told them: class size, travel times, access to programming, equity. We know that not every change is has potential consequences. We all know that. But that is why we're doing this work as a configuration committee that is planning for long-term decisions that will help us operationalize our strategic plan. So I'm not going to go through, I had written them here, I'm not going to go through every benchmark, because what is more important is that we are able to ask questions to Stephen today, and that he's able to highlight some of the work he did. But I do want us to remember some words that that I've used before, but also Keely and a couple of you guys brought up at our last meeting, and is that our actions or our inactions will have a lasting consequence in our district. So we are going to have to balance a lot of things today as we move this work forward, looking at our timeline too. So let's approach that with that lens, the work tonight. I'm not trying to put a heavy weight on you guys, but it is a lot, and we just need to get it done in order to pass some recommendations to the board. So with that, I am going to give it to you, Stephen. We have about 20 minutes to have the presentation and move into questions, and Jeannie is going to facilitate a round of feedback and questions for us.
All right, thank you, everybody. So what I prepared for you was a configuration structure built upon the 6th grade being moved to U32, and then how could we best meet some of the criteria that we set forth by making that move. So what you see in the recommendation there is first just kind of the rationale behind it. This goes through a lot of things that we've talked about as a committee already about optimizing class sizes, curriculum consistency, single grade level courses, being able to provide good consistent special education services. It would also, we think this would enhance the nursing, library, media, and school counselor services by doing this. There's, and we talked about this at one point in time, the developmental appropriateness of moving sixth grade. 6th through 8th grade is a developmentally appropriate. I would also just say that there's just as much research that says K-6 is developmentally appropriate for kids. It's just how you design the programs. So it is developmentally appropriate, and it provides some additional access to things like co-curricular activities at just a more robust level if we move 6th grade here. Also point out that, we really kind of set a marker. Schools less than 150 start to experience financial hardship, right? There's some things that make it difficult to have full-time staff, to have full-time programming for all of our kids. And so there's some financial sustainability issues there. And then travel time is just making sure that we stay within those criteria as well that we set. So this is laid out a couple of different, there's two pieces to it, right? There's one, if you move the 6th grade and have 3 elementary schools, we show what the projected enrollment would be for the K-5 configurations for next year. And then starting, and I don't know if there may not be a page number, but it's page 6. Is where if we keep all 5 elementary schools, what would the configuration look like by moving the 6th grade here? Now, I know that there's a question of multiple models. So these are really 2 models that we could look at. And you can see that in the K-5 model with 5 elementary schools, that there are areas we highlighted around not meeting our criteria. Mostly around class sizes or configuration options. There's also, I know that there were some questions about what if we did something like a K-3 school and a 4-6 school? What if we did a K-2 and a 4-3-5 school? So just recognize that those numbers are actually sitting here within your numbers. So when you look at a school like, if we took the possible K-5 grade configurations, and I'm just going to use East Montpelier as the example. And this is if you have all of Calais and East Montpelier together, if you were to split into a K-2 and a 3-5 school, you would have those numbers sitting right there in front of you. So K-1 and 2 would be 1 school population, that's 85 kids. And grades 3, 4, and 5 would be another school population, 113 kids. So essentially, if you split East Montpelier and Calais into a lower grades and an upper grade school with the 6th grade moving, you would be creating an 85 student school and 113 student school. The reason I didn't put those in as full models is because the other school, if you were looking at Middlesex, Doty, and Rumney, that is 48 students and 82 students. There was really no economy of scale that was gained in doing that process, and there would be the same issues, if not more, in terms of transportation for being able to transport kids from 2 different towns to 2 different locations. And so those numbers, you can see in here like where those might look, how those might look. If we were to try to do that kind of model. It's not one that I would recommend based upon our student numbers. Our number one issue, I think, to keep looking at is that we don't have a whole lot of kids in the lower grades. And so it is a student numbers issue that we're facing in making these decisions. So I would be happy to entertain questions about this as part of this. I tried to lay this out as, I hopefully as organized as possible for you to see the options here. But are there questions that would help you analyze this better as a committee? I guess clarifying questions would be the first part, right?
Sure, we can popcorn style any clarifying questions before we move into, yeah.
Yep, it's on. Red is on.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry if this is not a clarifying question, but a couple of things. This really sticks with our current both names of the schools and identification to towns. So I'm wondering if there was any consideration during this process to actually redrawing lines, like we had talked about briefly the other day as far as transportation lines. I'm concerned with it sticking with the names of schools and some of the language in general, but then it leads to what you just said. Like, did you really just stay, we're sticking with identifying schools by towns and not thinking about redrawing lines?
So I was able to look at some preliminary, like where are kids located throughout the district. There's really a pretty sharp divide between as most of us know, between Calais and Worcester. There's kind of a little ridge that runs through there. So there's kids that live on both sides of those. Middlesex is our only town that has some students down by the interstate that might be a little closer to Berlin. But our district really is organized as 4 schools in the north and 1 in the south in the way that it is. So Berlin is actually 9.5 miles away from its closest school, other than U32, right? So it does sit separate from the rest. So when we talk about transportation, the far reaches of the district are definitely not, we had talked about this before, is that Berlin couldn't be like a centered school for that. So transportation to Berlin is a little problematic, but there are a few places where we might be able to draw lines for it. But that would be something that I think that the committee would want to charge me with. It's a lot more involved to figure out where you would draw a boundary line to try to separate out students. But we're also talking about 3 relatively similar sized schools when we're looking at this model.
Are there other clarifying questions? Go ahead, Dave.
I guess I'm curious about whether the administration recommends any particular timeline if we were to recommend this and the district were to move forward with a consolidation like this. Has that been considered in this round of configuration?
Well, I would say sooner than later. We're on a slower pace than last year, and we were accused of going too fast last year. So I think that we probably don't need to go any slower than we're going now. Administration would need time to make, a lot of adjustments if that's what we needed to do. And if there's a couple of phases, right? This committee needs to propose to the board a configuration, and then the board would have to approve whatever configuration that you had, if there were a school closure, the board would have to approve that to be able to go to voters.
Go ahead, Chris.
So in your document here, you talk about the inconsistency of core systems and programming across the 5 elementary schools. Has there been any effort to try and address that since those issues have been raised, since they were raised last time we had this discussion as a configuration committee? And I was just wondering if there's any effort to address those other than through this type of system.
Well, so there's a lot of different things that are inconsistent. So can I use special education as an example of this? Is that we have different levels of service because of the number of kids in different schools, right? So in one school, we may have multiple special educators, so they can divide out the grade levels, where in another school, we may have just one special educator who's then responsible for multiple grade levels. That the only way that we would solve that problem would be hiring somebody else, but then that would reduce the caseloads to levels that we don't deem appropriate for our teachers. So I would say we've addressed what we can address. From here, it's just, do we want to hire somebody like a school nurse for a school of 80 or 90 kids, and have a school nurse at a school of 150 kids having the same job, but one having actually less demand on their time? I mean, we can hire people that aren't, according to our staffing ratios, are not actually at a school where we need a full-time person, but we could employ people full-time. We've chosen not to because there's a fairness issue that's hard to describe there amongst workloads of those of individual staff members. Is there something else specific? Like,
No, just wondering.
Stephen, can you talk closer to your microphone, please?
I'm right in my microphone, so.
It's pretty dim. It's pretty dim for us out here in the boonies.
Okay, is that better?
That's better.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
So the other, just a clarification, when you say articulated curriculum, what does that mean? Just define that for us.
So we've articulated our curriculum for grade levels, so, like kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth. But we've also articulated it for 1-2 classrooms, 3-4 classrooms, and 5-6 classrooms, because in some cases we have those multi-grade classes. This year at East Montpelier, we have 3 second, third grade classes. That is not what we would like to have in our configuration, but that was the only way that we could accommodate the off-size classes so that we didn't have too large of a class in any one grade level. So they don't match up with our articulated curriculum. Our teachers are having to design a curriculum that's specifically matching this year, and next year that will change because now we'll have a 3-4, which goes back to what we used to have. However, they've already changed up the curriculum so that it affects that curriculum as well. Not having consistency in terms of our grade level configurations means that kids' curriculum aren't consistent over time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there other questions? Go ahead, Michaela.
Sorry, I have a bunch. So I guess one of my questions is about what happens to the buildings in the towns where the schools would hypothetically be closed in this scenario. And kind of related to that, what happens if the town doesn't vote to close the school in that town?
So I'm not the person who makes a decision about what happens to the buildings. The board would have the option to sell the building to the town for $1, or if the town didn't want it, the board would then make a decision about what they would like to do. If a town doesn't vote to close a school, then we would have to figure out how to make it work. I will say that when you look at our enrollment areas that are very difficult are in the kindergarten and first, second grade, particularly at Doty and at Callis. But I would also say Rumney has some fluctuations, if you see, within their enrollment as well by grade level. And so there's certainly difficulty in those schools. The effect on a school like East Montpelier is what I just described, right? So there's not a consistent number of kids to be able to do our grade levels the way that we have them configured. We have more kids though, but it still creates a problem in the way that they're distributed within the school.
Yeah, okay. And I will add, again, that for what the town will do with the building, like Steven said, our articles of agreement says sell them to them for $1. We can also have a process. There's different experiences around the state of how they have approached that work. We can hire a consultant to do, to decide what happens to the building, do it a more of a community-oriented process to see what is the best use for the building as a community. It wouldn't necessarily have, the board would be involved, but it's a community decision. But so, yeah, that would be a separate process. So we can design that to make sure that it's the less impactful for our communities.
Stephen, this is just a confirmation of what I'm looking at. Sorry. When you look at if all 5 schools remain open, and you do have like some examples of some kindergarten classes, for example, where they're too small, but then also some 1-2s where you combine them into like 22. But if you were to split them, then you would be below.
Correct.
So it's not possible in either.
So you actually don't meet our criteria on either end.
way.
Right, so it's a little too big for above our maximum, and if you split it into 2 classes, it's below our minimum for each one of those.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Go ahead, Michaela.
No, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Flora. I appreciate that because I do think it's important that if the decision were made to close the school, that we work with the town in a way to make it feel like a positive thing for the community. Similarly, for the students that are potentially moving from one school community to another, I'm hopeful that we can work a lot to create a new school community that's less town-based. And then kind of going along with that, I know it's complicated by contracts and seniority and all that, but I'm curious, and maybe it's premature to think about this, but if there's been thought given to making sure that, you know, some really key adults in one building would be moving to the other building, so that students who are having to move are going to have some familiar adults in their lives for the transition. And that's not to say I trust that everyone will welcome everyone with open arms, 100%, but I'm just curious if there's flexibility there or there's been thought given to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were looking at combining two school communities, we would definitely look at how do we combine the two school communities so that they become one. That's staff, certainly students, families, the communities themselves. I mean, we know that if we were to move into a situation where we closed a school, that's a big change for that community, for the kids involved, the staff involved, and all of the parents and community members. We understand that. I just want to be clear that I'm not advocating for any of this. I'm bringing this as information to the committee to make a decision.
Yeah, I just want to kind of double down on Michaela's point. Last year, a little bit earlier, the language that was used when we were talking about bringing schools together was really disappointing. And again, in this proposal, and I understand, Stephen, this is probably phase one of this, right, before it gets tweaked a little bit, the word reassignment is used. So it again feels a little bit like we have to be, if this is to move forward, we have to be really intentional in the language that we're using and the way that we're thinking about redeveloping and rebirthing, if you will, a school that is inclusive of the communities that will be there. So just a reminder, and it was, again, if this is to move forward, I think that piece was really missing from the intentional phasing of the last process. So just really doubling down on that. Thank you.
We are starting to move to feedback, but I think we have a couple questions still.
Daniel first.
You could argue my comment might be more feedback than question. But I'm agreeing with what I'm hearing from my colleagues on the committee, and I think I'm thinking about the sequence of events and the importance of describing and designing a transition as an important step before this comes to the full board. And I think a lot of us are sort of processing it as we're hearing one another's perspectives, and this is sort of coming out as sort of a tumble of reactions. But I think the importance of building new communities rather than transplanting some into other communities, and the notion of what happens to those community facilities, that also feels like an important thing for people to understand as part of the transition before they choose whether this is the most equitable and sensible path forward for the district. So a lot of these things, recognizing the timeline is problematic. Going back to my first question, I think a lot of people, before they make a decision about this, are going to want to understand more about the detail. And I think that's a really challenging proposition, but that's my reaction here.
Thank you. So what would the anticipated reduction in staffing be for both teaching staff, support staff, and administrative staff if this came to pass?
So with teaching staff, there's there's not a whole lot that's as a part of all of this, because the number of students next year is about similar to the number of students this year. In terms of support staff, though, we are looking at, if you close a building, you no longer need custodial, food service, or administrative for that building. So there are changes in that. We didn't put exact numbers to anything, because I just want to be really clear, is that I'm not going to keep doing modeling after modeling after modeling on every scenario. I need more specific instructions from this committee and the board so that we can then move forward on this. I'm trying to be respectful in the way that I say this, but I've been doing this for the board for over a year and a half now, and I just need better direction about this. Daniel, I appreciate your comments. I mean, if this is what we need in the process, then that's great. I've been involved in this process for quite some time, and so if you want me to model something very specific, I'm happy to model that, but it needs to be specific at this point in time.
I'm going to move us into feedback rounds, and if questions come up, that's great, but I'm going to actually have us do a round so that everybody gets a chance to share. And so is there somebody who would like to get us started? Andy, do you want to contribute at this time, or would you like to wait?
He does look frozen.
I'm going to get Michaela to get us started, and we'll work our way around towards Gillian.
But then I would need to know what my feedback is. I mean, I think I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I appreciate that there are a lot of challenges to this process. I think that, you know, there are some concerns that have come up about how to make this transition, but I think overall this looks like a good model to me. I mean, I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves that, like, something needs to change, and I think it's an exciting model, as long as enough care and intention is put into how to make that transition. But I appreciate all the work that's been done.
I would echo what McKaylin said, and also one of Deborah's comments about using this as an opportunity to really rebrand and really think about how we're moving forward. I think this isn't feedback, and it's more of a comment similar to Stephen's, is that sort of sitting from my other seat, not on this committee, is it is, I'm just going to say, it is not fair to our staff and to our families to talk about and make plans for how we would do a transition that we do not know that the board supports. We've got a lot of thoughts in the back of our mind, but it is too stressful. And I think that the doing work with the lack of an ultimate and clear purpose for doing that work, particularly when it impacts all of our professional lives and our students and our schools that we care very much about and understand about the reality. I want to be really clear. I'm saying this with an understanding of the very difficult reality that we have to face. But I cannot put my staff through that, and I cannot put my community through that unless I have unless the board has said, we're going to put this to the voters, then absolutely we will do it. But the process has to be followed. We as a committee have to recommend this to the board, and then the board has to determine whether or not it's going to move forward. And until those steps are followed, we need to not be doing the work. We will do the work. That's, I think, what I would ask that the board and this committee recognize, is that you have staff in every school in this building or in school in this district who care very much about their students and their families and will take care of them. So Sorry, got a little soapboxy there.
Well, I'm glad you did it first. I think, what both of my fellow townsfolk have said, I fully agree with. And I just think it's really also important to acknowledge what has, particularly the Doty community with the Turtle Island conversation, been through now multiple times. And we cannot do that to those students. I know that one of the things we've talked about consistently on this committee is consistency and how incredibly important that is. Consistency in messaging, consistency in practice. I really, the past couple experiences we've had, or I'm sorry, I have had in watching the board go through this are incredibly frustrating. We think we're at a place, we go to a meeting because we think a decision is going to be made, and then all of a sudden people change, questions are raised that should have been raised earlier in the process. So I agree with what Gillian said in that we need to know that the board is behind it and moving forward. And I'm not sure how that happens at the board level, like what the temperature check is, if there's anything like that that happens, but we really cannot bring this forward until we know that the board supports it. And I said it before, and I'll say it again, we have to have faith. The board should have faith in administrators making decisions that are best for our students. And we should have faith that our staff are going to do the work. We need to do it along with them and perhaps apply appropriate pressure when needed, but that doesn't mean that we should be going in this without that faith of the folks that we have hired that engage with our children every day. So that is right now one of the fears that I'm sitting with, is this gets to the board and then all of a sudden things change because the conversation goes left, right, and center and is really, frankly, hard to follow.
I guess I would say similarly to what you're saying is, as someone who is magnificent at getting lost in details, I would just caution us not to get lost in details we don't need to discuss right now. So I hear a lot about like rebranding schools and the transition, but right now I feel like we need to make a decision about what's best holistically for students and our district, and then have the faith in the people who work with the students the most to make that transition in a really seamless way.
I agree with everyone who has spoken so far. I think that this model makes a lot of sense. I support it. I also think it's important to highlight what Stephen said, that he can't provide a model for everything, right? Having been through a consolidation, you can make these every week, but people have messy reactions to something like this because it's hard. Some people that we might think would stay no matter what will feel really uncomfortable with this move and may decide to retire. Other people might be on board. You just don't know how things will shift, how kids will feel. It's not predictable, and you can't put all of it in a table. So I think that's just good to recognize.
Just a pause here to say we're going to go to Daniel, then we're going to go online to Keely and Andy, and then get to Chris.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, just that I also sort of like the direction that this memo takes us in and this recommendation takes us in. I think, there's just I think for me, I've been thinking a lot about sort of how a lot of people define and experience equity and inequity in different ways. And I think this is I think we've wrestled with that quite a bit with this committee, and I think this proposed model does its best to balance the needs of every student as much as possible.
Keely, are you ready to share?
Yes, and sorry for being late. I'm traveling and just got to where I was going. I have missed some of the comments, but I'll go back and read them and listen to the recording. But I did review the proposal, and I think that it's really well thought out, and I think that it's a result of us just being in a really difficult position where I think that no one wants to see schools closed, but when we look at actually what's best for students and giving them opportunities, and particularly in the face of the Education Transformation Act, I want to be the one that makes the decision so that we can sort of control it. And so that we really have a good idea of how we can move forward and how we can best serve our students. And I think that this proposal does that.
Andy, are you ready to share?
Yes, thank you. In conversations I've had with people here around town, the folks I know around town in East Montpelier, the question comes up, why are we doing this now when the state is in the middle of deciding some larger questions that are going to impact this? Maggie Lenz had a very good piece in the Times Argus yesterday that I would recommend, where she's kind of summarizing where the committee is on this at the state level, and they're wrestling with different options at this point, any one of which would have a different effect on what our outcome should be, it looks like. So I'm wondering why we are making a big change now that's going to create stress with transitions in a number of ways when we're liable to have a big change come down on us from above. I find what the model you wrote, Stephen, is very internally consistent and well thought out. I don't think it gives enough weight to the communities and the effect on the communities. And I think that's something we're going to have to wrestle with. And frankly, it's a bit disingenuous to suggest you don't favor this when it's the one you wrote. And so, that's okay. But I'm curious about why this should move forward now when we have a big change about to rain down on us from above.
Stephen, do you want to address that before we?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Chris?
So I am with Andy on this one, I think. Well, I know I'm with Andy on this one. I think there's not been any discussion about the impact on community, even though that was one of the criteria that we were supposed to address in terms of our configuration. And maybe we can say, well, we don't know what the impact will be on community, but we haven't even made an effort to try and measure what that will be. We're in a position where the communities whose schools may close are the ones who are really deciding. We're not deciding because of our articles of agreement in which the towns where the school is located are the ones who vote on whether to close that school or not. This proposal is not much different than what we dealt with last year, I don't believe, in a substantive way. And it's kind of hard to understand why there would be a different outcome from the community reaction to what was presented last year. So if we had the magic wand where the board itself could decide, I think this would be a workable plan, although I'd rather see only one school close rather than two, just because of the devastating impact that I anticipate would happen to the community. It's kind of ironic that we're going to be voting later at the board on resolutions that the VSBA is proposing, where it talks about the community being the cornerstone, or the local school being the cornerstone of the community and vibrancy and things like that. You folks may not know about that, but it's in our resolution for the VSBA. So now we're kind of anticipating going against that. So for that reason, for these multiple reasons, I'm not in favor of this proposal, even though it's well thought out. I will say it's well thought out, but I think we're running, yeah, I think it's difficulty. Thank you.
I would like to address one thing substantively.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we have going into next school year is that our schools are smaller. So we are talking about an enrollment of 52 students at Doty. We are still going to be faced with making decisions about what we do with pre-kindergarten, kindergarten at Doty and Callis because of the number of students that are there. So I would just say that by saying that we're not going to do anything with configuration does not mean that we might not have to make decisions about what's best for our students in some of those classrooms anyway, which have been challenging as well, right? We've done this piece before, but we see a declining student enrollment that continues. Overall, you're going to see that from last year to this year, our enrollment went up a little bit, but that was an anomaly because of some other circumstances, but it's going to continue to decline when you look at our pre-K enrollment over time. And so we know that we will have more than 47 kindergartners, right? Because that's what our pre-K4 enrollment is right now. There's always more kids that come, but we're not going to double that number. That's never happened, right? We're talking about a small, somewhere probably in the 60 to 70 kindergarten range. That's one of our smaller classes that we'll have. And then we're going to continue to see that trend. So it has there is some substantive change, particularly at the lower grades.
Well, my point on substantive change was that the structure isn't any different. The numbers may be different, but in terms of the model we're proposing to go to is not much different.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I get a chance, not because I'm chairing the committee, but just to share, like, with you guys how I agree with what has been said, especially how we would involve our communities in any rebranding. I see this proposal as taking care of our kids and operationalizing our strategic plan, really modeling what we want for those core beliefs that we did spend a lot of time talking to our communities about what they wanted for our kids. And I know that we can't have all the details in order for us to have the courage to jump and grow the schools that we want to grow for our community. So I would like to reframe us and send that message to the board and say, like, we're trying to grow community. We're trying to grow schools. It's not necessarily just because some schools will need to be closed, and we're not doing this just because Act 73. We're doing this despite Act 73. This is the reality that we faced ourselves, and we keep doing it year after year. So we're trying to come to a space or a place where we have stability and we're planning ahead, not having to, like, every year shift in order to sort of miraculously make the budget or decide that, oh, hey, we can't have pre-K in this school because we don't have enough kids, and now the families are divided. Oh, maybe we don't have kindergarten. Let's make it. So I hope that we have the courage to send that message so that then we can get into the details, right? How will we do this transition? How can they start planning for the better tomorrow for our district, and better give us what we've been trying to say is that we would try to create not something, but that we would be in a better place for us to have conversations with any other district if we came to this space.
We want to make sure we have time for public comment, so I think it's time for Flora likes to have 3 takeaways to report to the board meeting. So I'm going to pass it off to you for that, Flora, before we open public comment.
Go ahead, Killian.
I have a process question just for today. In terms of our work as a committee, I had the understanding that we were going to decide as a committee this evening about whether or not we were going to send this to the board. So Is that happening after public comment?
No, Jeannie was just saying we want to leave some time for public comment and what we want to send to the board, but we can't, absolutely, we want to send, just like we did the last time. But, we want to highlight, so we need some time for public comment. We are at not even 15 minutes. So with that in mind, what do we want to send to the board? Not just highlights, but what do we want to say to the board as a committee, right? Go ahead.
So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly, but I'm also responding a little bit to a few of the comments that were made. I think that we need to do this in spite of Act 73, and also Act 73 does influence why potentially is this proposal more palatable for communities, is I think that there's a sense that change is coming. And so I think it was Keely who said, we want to have a hand in that change. And this potentially is an opportunity to do that. I don't think that we should actually fully rely on change coming, because who knows what's going to happen next year at the legislature? Who knows what becomes priority? Who knows what recommendations come forward? And if I'm tracking them correctly, what we're doing would potentially just keep moving us forward towards the direction that the two proposals that have come forward to the committee are. Keeps us in a similar area. It wouldn't break up our towns, at least the two that I've seen that have come forward.
And to clarify, another thing is that we as a committee, because this is not on a board action on the board packet today, we are just updating the board, but we need to give a clear recommendation as a committee to our administrators, so that if there's any cleanup, anything that needs to happen to this plan as it is, so that we present it to the board at our next meeting, right? We have, as part of our parameters as a board, we are approving, one of the parameters is that we will work with the model of the redistricting task force too. Daniel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we should clearly recommend this to the board tonight, first of all. Second of all, I think we should also signal to the board that we don't believe that the work of this committee is done. I think an important response to your question, or your comment, Chris, is the community dimension of this has been considered, because the makeup of this committee is very different this time around than it was before. We have active committee members representing the interests of the committee. We have a principal from an affected school on this committee, and we all have the experience and arguably trauma of the first time around and the unsuccessful process that we experienced last year in our pockets and in our hearts as we're considering this. And so I think, I frankly disagree with what you say when you say that we aren't considering the community dimension. We can't but consider the community dimension.
So one thing that we're saying is we are recommending the model to the committee. Could I see a show of thumbs?
Can I propose that we hear public comment first, so that it's not, we're supposed to hear public comment with the potential for influence, and if we're voting beforehand, there's no pretense then. I would say let's hear a public comment and then have the vote. And I'd like to briefly respond to, well, Deborah, I completely agree with you that we should, if we're going to do this, move for a good cause, not fear, even though it can be strategic at the same time, but not fear. And Daniel, I think community, if we really addressing the community, it would show up somewhere in these pages, recognizing the fact of what the impact will be on communities where it's closed, and recognizing and be transparent about it. I mean, we talk a lot about transparency and just not ignoring that, because that is what's going to be driving a lot of the people who are going to have the say with their votes in this. So I think recognizing that and dealing with that would be a better way to go in terms of success. Thanks.
We're going to take the next 10 minutes for public comment. Are there people here who would like to comment? I think Spencer has a mic, maybe?
Okay.
Elizabeth Brown, Callis, and on the board. I've been thinking a lot about the comment of not getting stuck in the weeds of detail. And one of the things I did 3 years ago was I took a personality compass assessment. And I know some of you will know what I'm referring to. But in that assessment, you can either be categorized as north, south, east, or west. And north is goal-centered, south is process-centered, East is quality-centered, and West is creativity-centered. And so when I think about the next steps, and first and foremost, thank you all for all of your hard work. I'm really excited with what I'm seeing. I think we really need to think about that compass because our community is what is made up of that compass. There are people who are like, let's just get it done, and there are people who say, I need to know that this transition is going to be done in a way that feels supportive to me as a community, and for me, that's the community part. The community part is really about bringing the community in and saying, let's work together as a community and figure out what is going to work best should we make these really important, hard decisions. As somebody who is a South, I am often emotion-driven, which can be a benefit and a challenge, but I think all of those perspectives need to be taken into consideration in order for whatever the configuration is that the board votes on to pass within the towns as well.
Okay, we have a couple of people online. Lisa, Hannah, do you want to unmute yourself? You have a minute and a half.
Lisa Hanna from Worcester. I would just request of the board that if you move forward with recommending this model, or of the committee, that if you recommend this model to the board, that you are precise in your language. We heard it from a couple folks around like the rebranding of the schools. And while I do trust, right, like I trust the narrative that of course we would like rebrand and bring communities together, I do think the language is really important. And if we're going to recommend this to the board, it needs to be not reassigning students from Doty to Rumney, but that we are closing a school because we believe it's best for students, and we are creating a new school at the Middlesex site for Worcester and Middlesex students. And same for Calais and East Montpelier. And I really would request that you make sure that that language is true, that we are creating new schools, not reassigning students from one community to another. So again, I trust that we have that in mind, but the language in the document right now says reassigning, and I think the communities have said loud and clear over the last couple of years that we need to know that our students are not just being reassigned, that we're going to create a new district, a new school for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Lila?
Yeah, Lila Richardson, Worcester. I just wanted to sort of echo some of the points that Andy and Chris made about the fact that this memo does not address the community impact. And this was something that the committee talked about for a long time and decided should be included. And we're not just talking about some general idea of making people feel that there's a new community where there were discussions about, will there be an effect on property value in the towns where the schools are closed? I think there will be. Is this going to make those towns less attractive to younger families? So we have a sort of downward spiral where the population grows older in those towns, and that has happened in other areas. So I think not considering and not talking about those issues when everybody agreed that they should be part of the criteria is very troubling. And I guess I would just also like to remind everyone that a month ago, there was a discussion about a very different model where the sixth graders were not going to be moved to U32. And there was going to be a sort of wait and see how Act 73 plays out. I guess that was
Thank you,
my
Lila. Sophia?
I don't really have my thoughts organized. I just want to speak on behalf of my kids and all the other kids who are likely to be facing transitions in 2028 as well if unforeseen things come down the line with Act 73. I had to tell my kids that this was on the table because they're going to hear it from friends, and the looks on their faces this morning completely broke my heart. And I understand the numbers. I understand that's a huge part of this conversation, but I would love to see really explicit and transparent discussion around how what this impact is on a community where the school is at the heart of the community, and how is it equitable to require a transition in 2026 and another possible transition in 2028. I just want to really reiterate what Chris said about why are we doing this now when they may have to go through it again. My children have been through so many transitions. It has an absolutely massive impact on their anxiety and their experience of going to school and their trust of the school system. And I want to be able to speak confidently with them about their futures and to really say that the adults around them have their best interests in mind. And that's not just a numbers issue. It's about considering the integrity of the community that their school is embedded in. So please consider community not as an afterthought, and really just think about what impact this has on the town.
Thanks, Sophia. And we have one last, Caitlin.
Hi, I just wanted to note that in the model presented in the packet today, my child will be one of the students in the class that's listed here as 2, but I know there's at least 3. And obviously numbers are never perfect. And that is a significantly small class, which is certainly a concern for me. My son is also on a combined Romney-Doty soccer team. And just something of note in that combination is that the team plays as Romney-Doty. There's not a new combined name there. They're wearing Romney pennies, which is fine. Romney has pennies, as far as I know, Doty doesn't, branded ones anyway. But that's something where if this is really going to be sent to the board as the proposal, things can begin already. We can begin using combined names in our sports teams. We can choose a new color to represent a combined team. If this is something that's going to move ahead, we need to start with our language, as everyone's already said, as soon as possible. And where I may have a different opinion than others in my community, as my child is one in a class of 3 or 4, certainly a lot of the elders in our community have a very strong attachment to our school, and they will need to see the details for a future of the building, for a future of the community, if they're going to be voters that are going to affirm a change. So again, you can't do all the detail work right away, but that is something you really need to consider if you are going to be addressing the entire community and not just the parents or soon-to-be parents of students.
Thanks, Caitlin. Lauren, and then we're going to wrap up.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, it took me forever to figure out how to raise my hand. I just wanted to reiterate, I guess, what a couple people have said. I was pretty turned off in the proposal about the reassignment language. I know many people have stated that, but I just wanted to also add my voice there. It felt pretty disingenuous to read that after, especially a lot of the language last time around didn't feel that sterile. And not much was talked about at all about the impact of moving 6th grade to U32 tonight. That's a pretty big shift. I will have a 6th grader next year. I'm a middle school teacher. I fully believe in the middle school model. I'm a little wary of having my 11-year-old on the same campus as 18-year-olds. And my understanding is while the core classes are separate in the middle school wing, much of the campus is, you know, all the kids together. So I'd like to learn more about how that is going to look and how the middle school model is, you know, how the 6th grade will integrate into the middle school model and what I know it's been talked about with the middle level endorsement, but what 6th grade teachers will bring to the table there in terms of it being a real middle school model and not just shifting 6th graders to U32. And I think before something like this would go to a vote, I am curious about what the FTEs would actually look like. I'm just
Oops. Thank you, Lauren. We got your last comment. FTEs is what you were saying?
Yeah. Well, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to unmute. I mean, what that actually looks like, because if you still like go by the EQS, I think we're going to still have a lot of not full-time FTEs at a combined school, and what the new busing would look like as well. I think it said the busing would be improved, but we've heard that many times before. So I just think there needs to be a lot, like Daniel said, this committee's work is not done, and whether it's the work of this committee or the administration, there needs to be a lot of information shared. And I know that's not the purview of tonight, but just, I don't know if I'll ever have another opportunity.
Thanks, Laurie. Okay, so I guess I would like, before we move even to the 3 points, I would like a motion from the committee to do a recommendation. Would somebody be willing to do a motion? Sharon, is that?
I think it has to be important.
Yeah. No, it can be any committee. Sharon, you can do it. Any committee member can do it.
I'll make a motion to recommend the proposal as submitted. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No, go for it, but I'll second it.
You need to turn on your mic.
Oh, sorry. I'll second that.
Okay. So the motion is by Sharon, second by Chris. Is the committee ready to vote? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Andy, you were.
Any abstentions? Andy, are you abstaining or no? Or I see you're voting down. And Kelly, was that a thumbs up? Kelly? It's just she's going in and out.
You vote?
She said she's, but yeah, she was a thumbs up. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yes, thumbs up.
6 thumbs up and one no.
Two.
Two no's.
Andy said no.
Oh, yeah, and Andy, right. All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And now I still looking for 2, not that this is not a big news to update. So we're recommending to the board a model as submitted is one of the updates. The second update is that we have to be really thoughtful about the transition process, and the third one is that we have to be really thoughtful about language and how we are all of that, I haven't written it down, but so those are the 3 things that I had. So if you could, yeah, go ahead.
I like those 3. I would just say that this committee sees a role for itself and is available to the board as a tool in developing that.
Okay.
I also just think it's really important to acknowledge that when this committee was formed, there was a calendar that involved community involvement. And that didn't happen.
But that is going to happen now, right? Because now we have the models, which is when the community.
I understand that.
Yeah.
It's just that I think what the community has seen is what's out there as far as like, here's our timeline.
Yeah.
And there was very little communicated to me as a committee member, let alone the community, about how that's shifting. So along with language is messaging.
Okay. Yeah. Messaging. Okay. That brings the configuration committee to an end, and we're going to shift to our board meeting. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn our configuration committee.
Move to adjourn.
Daniel, second by Chris.